Right now, 500 feet beneath the Western Pacific, a USS Virginia-class submarine is on a classified patrol. It has been underwater for 47 days. Inside one of its berthing compartments, a 19-year-old from Indiana is lying in a metal bunk the size of a coffin, inches from a torpedo, listening to the hull groan under the pressure of the ocean around him. He finished a 6-hour watch an hour ago. The mattress he's on is still warm from the sailor who just left it. That's not a worst-case scenario. That's Tuesday. On a U.S. Navy submarine, rank isn't just a title, it's a physical condition you live inside. Officers sleep in staterooms. Senior sailors have their own racks. But the lowest-ranking enlisted sailors, most of them barely out of high school, live in conditions that would be unrecognizable to most Americans, and they do it from the most cramped, noisiest, least private corner of the vessel. They handle the hardest jobs and stand the longest watches. This is life at the bottom of the submarine hierarchy. And the people living it aren't who you'd expect. Before we get into where these sailors sleep, you need to know who they actually are. Because the answer might surprise you. Rank has an address. A modern U.S. Navy attack submarine packs roughly 120 enlisted sailors and 15 officers into a living area roughly the size of a small 3-bedroom house. Everything else belongs to weapons, machinery, and the systems keeping them alive. What's left for the crew gets divided, and rank decides who gets what. Officers live in what's called officers' country, a section with shared staterooms, typically 2 to 4 people per room. By civilian standards, it's nothing impressive. By submarine standards, it's a different world. They have a door. They have a degree of separation from the traffic and noise of the rest of the boat. Junior enlisted sailors get none of that. These are the E1s through E3s, seaman recruits, seaman apprentices, the newest and lowest-ranking crew members on board. Most are 18 or 19 years old. Many enlisted straight out of high school. They arrive with almost no experience, and they land at the absolute bottom of a hierarchy that governs everything: your job, your hours, your sleep, and exactly how much space you're allowed to occupy. Their berthing areas are packed into whatever interior space the submarine can spare, wedged between compartments and equipment, with rows of stacked bunks crammed together so tightly that 2 sailors have to turn sideways to pass each other in the narrow corridor between them. For these sailors, rank isn't something that shows up only in the chain of command. It shows up every time they go to sleep. But it's not just where they sleep that's the problem. It's whether they even get a bed to themselves at all. Hot bunking. For junior enlisted sailors on a submarine, even having a bed isn't guaranteed. The racks inside berthing compartments are narrow metal bunks, stacked in tight rows. Each one is roughly 6 feet long and about half the width of a normal bed. There's barely enough clearance above your face to roll over. A thin mattress, a small curtain, and a shallow storage bin. That's the full extent of your personal space for a deployment that can last months. But it gets harder than that. There aren't enough racks for every sailor to have their own. The Navy solution is called hot bunking, sometimes hot racking. 3 sailors share 2 racks, rotating through them based on their watch schedules. When one sailor climbs out after finishing his shift, another climbs in. The mattress is still warm from the body that just left it. That's where the name comes from. Think about what that means in practice. You finish 6 hours on watch. Your feet ache. Your eyes are burning. You make your way through cramped passageways back to the berthing area, and you slide into a bunk that someone else just vacated minutes ago. Officers don't hot bunk. Senior enlisted sailors don't hot bunk. This arrangement exists almost exclusively for the youngest, most junior members of the crew, the same sailors who are already carrying the heaviest share of grunt work, maintenance, and cleaning. After everything else the day has taken from them, they don't even get to return to their own bed. If you're finding this hard to believe, you're not alone. Hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Because it gets worse before it gets better. Little privacy. Once a junior sailor finally gets into a rack, there is exactly one thing standing between him and the rest of the submarine, a thin fabric curtain. That's it. No room, no door, no wall, a narrow strip of fabric pulled across the opening of a metal bunk. On the other side of it, sailors are walking past at all hours. Machinery hums constantly through the hull. Voices carry from nearby compartments. A submarine never goes quiet, not during watch changes, not during meals, not during the few hours you're supposed to be sleeping. The curtain blocks light. It does nothing about sound. Storage is just as constrained. Each sailor gets a small locker or shallow bin attached to their rack. Everything they own for the entire deployment, uniforms, civilian clothes, hygiene items, photos from home, whatever keeps them connected to their life on land, has to fit in that single space. What doesn't fit gets tucked into the bunk itself, alongside the mattress. So the space a junior sailor sleeps in is also the space he stores everything he owns, in a vessel packed with over 100 people, accessible to that constant flow of foot traffic by nothing more than a curtain he can pull shut. For the youngest sailors on board, that curtain and that rack are the only private corner they have. And even that, they share. And if you think a shared curtain is as bad as it gets, wait until you hear where some of these sailors actually have to sleep when the berthing areas are completely full. Sleeping next to equipment. When every berthing rack is full, the Navy finds other places to put junior sailors. One of those places is the torpedo room. Located at the bow of the submarine, the torpedo room is a working weapons compartment. It holds the vessel's primary armaments, heavy torpedoes, each one several feet long, secured on metal rails alongside the launch tubes. It is not designed to be a sleeping space. But it has floor area, and floor area is a resource, so extra racks get wedged into whatever gaps remain between weapons, pipes, and handling equipment. Junior sailors assigned to the torpedo room sleep a few feet from weapons systems that weigh several tons. The room doesn't stop being operational because someone is resting in it. Sailors continue to inspect torpedoes, run maintenance checks, and cycle weapons through loading procedures in the same compartment. When operations are active, the room fills with movement, mechanical noise, and crew members moving heavy equipment around the racks. Picture being 19 years old, 8 months out of boot camp, and climbing into a narrow bunk wedged between a launch tube and a rack of torpedoes. The lights don't go off just because it's your rest period. The noise doesn't stop. For these sailors, it becomes normal fast. That normalization, of genuinely extreme conditions, is one of the quieter things that happens to a person at the bottom of the submarine hierarchy. But sleeping next to torpedoes wasn't even the worst sleeping situation some submariners have faced. On one submarine, the racks themselves became the problem, and the Navy's response shocked the entire crew. Bedbug infestation. In 2020, sailors aboard the USS Connecticut S.N. 22 reported something that almost seems absurd given the context: their berthing racks had become infested with bedbugs. For months, junior enlisted sailors were returning from watch shifts to find insects moving through their mattresses, curtains, and bedding. One petty officer described sailors getting eaten alive in their racks. The infestation spread through multiple sleeping areas before leadership took meaningful action, and according to the sailors who came forward, that response came far too slowly. When remediation efforts finally began, the tight, stacked geometry of submarine berthing worked against them. Racks were steamed. Bedding was inspected. The infestation kept spreading, because in a space where bunks are stacked inches apart and curtains touch adjacent bunks, there is nowhere for a problem like this to be contained. A temporary pierside shelter was eventually set up. But it was too small and too crowded to absorb everyone who needed it. Some sailors chose instead to sleep in chairs, in vehicles, or directly on the metal deck rather than return to their racks. For the lowest-ranking sailors, the ones with no private quarters, no alternative sleeping arrangement, and the least authority to escalate the problem up the chain of command, the infestation was a months-long ordeal with no easy exit. It was also a reminder of exactly where they stood. Please, take a second to hit that like button. Over 90% of people watching haven't subscribed yet. It costs you nothing and helps us keep making videos like this. The bedbugs were bad. But there's something that affects every single junior sailor on every single submarine, every deployment, something invisible that most people have never considered. And it starts the moment you go underwater. Health concerns. A submarine runs on a completely sealed atmosphere. When submerged, there is no fresh outside air. Internal systems continuously recycle what's already inside the hull, scrubbing carbon dioxide, regulating oxygen, filtering contaminants. It works, but the air produced isn't identical to what you'd breathe on land. Oxygen levels run slightly lower, carbon dioxide runs slightly higher. For junior sailors arriving straight from training, often never having spent time in an environment anything like this, the first weeks aboard can bring headaches, fatigue, and a persistent sense of physical heaviness as the body adjusts. They adapt, but it takes time, and they're expected to function fully throughout the process. The longer-term picture is more complicated. Because the atmosphere is sealed for months at a time, trace amounts of chemicals from machinery, fuels, lubricants, and air treatment systems circulate continuously. Veterans advocacy groups and researchers have flagged potential exposure to substances including benzene, ozone, asbestos, and monoethanolamine, a compound used in the CO2 scrubbing systems that keep the crew alive. Exposures are monitored and generally kept within established safety limits. But those limits are calculated for average exposure. For junior sailors spending 6 months breathing recycled submarine air around the clock, from the most crowded section of the boat, the lived experience of those numbers is something different. They're not on the submarine occasionally. They're there continuously, from the tightest corner of the vessel, for the entire deployment. And all of that. The cramped racks, the shared beds, the recycled air, they're dealing with it on almost no sleep. Because the submarine schedule doesn't care how tired you are. Hectic watch schedule. The submarine never stops operating, which means the crew never does either. Most submarines run 6-hour watch rotations. Under the traditional 18-hour cycle, sailors stand 6 hours on watch, then have 12 hours off. That sounds manageable until you understand what off actually means. Off watch time is when maintenance happens. When cleaning gets done. When training is conducted, when additional collateral duties are completed, when the 100 small tasks that keep a submarine running get distributed among the junior crew. And they're distributed unevenly. Senior sailors and officers carry those duties too, but they carry fewer of them, and they have more authority to protect their sleep. Junior enlisted sailors, at the bottom of the hierarchy, absorb the largest share. The one with the least rank is also the one most likely to get pulled off his rest period to handle something that couldn't wait. The result is sleep that comes in fragments. A few hours before a drill interrupts. A few more before an urgent maintenance call. The watch cycle rotates throughout the deployment, meaning the hours you sleep this week won't match next week. There is no consistent bedtime. There is no reliable stretch of uninterrupted rest. Many submariners average 5 to 6 hours per night, broken into pieces. It is not sustainable in any long-term clinical sense. It is, nonetheless, the baseline for the youngest sailors on board. So they're exhausted, they're breathing recycled air, they're sleeping in shifts, and now they have to share a bathroom with how many people? The number is almost unbelievable. Limited bathrooms. On some submarines, up to 50 junior sailors share a single shower. The heads, Navy terminology for bathrooms, are compact and purely functional. Water on a submarine is produced through distillation and carefully rationed, so showers are not a place to decompress. They're a task to complete quickly and efficiently, with the next person already waiting. For junior sailors, bathroom access is one more layer of coordination stacked on top of an already relentless schedule. You time your shower around your watch. You wait in line. You move fast. There is no lingering, no hot water to stand under at the end of a brutal day. Officers and senior enlisted have access to separate facilities. Junior sailors don't. And when you multiply that disparity across every single day of a months-long deployment, it stops being a minor inconvenience. It becomes one more daily reminder, concrete and unavoidable, of where you rank on the submarine. Here's what most people don't expect when they hear all of this: ask any veteran submariner about their time on board, and almost none of them will tell you they regret it. In fact, most say it was the most important experience of their lives. How is that possible? It comes down to one thing the Navy never has to advertise: strong camaraderie. Here is what doesn't get said enough: the conditions that make submarine life hardest for junior sailors are also what create some of the most durable bonds in the military. When you hot bunk with someone, you are sharing something most people never share with anyone. When you're both sleeping 3 feet from a torpedo, both running on fragmented sleep, both rationing shower time and standing back-to-back watches and eating in shifts, you stop being strangers very quickly. The pretense that exists between people who have comfortable lives and comfortable distance disappears fast in a sealed steel vessel 400 feet underwater. Junior sailors on submarines build trust at a pace that is almost impossible to replicate anywhere else. It isn't team building. It isn't training exercises. It is surviving the same grinding, confined, exhausting reality alongside the same people for months, in conditions where everyone's performance directly affects whether everyone else comes home. The hierarchy is real. The conditions are hard. But the people you go through it with become something close to family, and for many veterans, long after the difficult memories of cramped racks and broken sleep have faded, those bonds are what they carry with them. So that's what life looks like at the bottom of the submarine's hierarchy. No guaranteed bed. No private space. Shared everything: racks, showers, recycled air, the constant noise of a vessel that never sleeps. The youngest sailors on board carry the heaviest workload in the tightest quarters, and most of them would do it again without hesitation. How long do you think you'd last? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want to go deeper into what life is actually like inside the Navy's most secretive vessels, subscribe. We cover it all.